Dani and Eoan were supposed to go to see one of Ian's favorite artists this year. She looks down at an envelope containing 2 tickets and a binder next to this envelope with 2 tickets. And she opens the binder and it has the reservations to one of the nicest hotels and reservations to one of the best restaurants in the area. They bonded over this artist, not only because of their songs about love, but songs that were sad and about heartache. And they promised that the heartache would never be them, that they would never experience that together, that everything that they went through, they would get through, even if it was bad. But as Dani looks at these, she can't bring herself to take them with her, so she's going to put the tickets in one of Ian's boxes. And she'll just go back to packing.
Walking up to the bookshelves, Eoan looks over all the different things that they found. Sweet stories of cats dancing, and stories about people staying together, travel magazines of spots they thought they would go together. And then his eyes settle on 2 copies of Jurassic Park, one well-read and earmarked, one looks like it was barely touched. And he thinks back to when he handed it over to Dani the first time. Opens the one that's barely touched, pulls out a Sharpie pen as his phone number is still inside the cover after all this time. Crosses it off, takes the effort to go through multiple layers of ink so that even if somebody tried to read it, they wouldn't be able to find his number underneath all of the layers. And then he takes the copy of his and puts it in the donate pile, and puts Dani's copy in her own pile, thinking maybe one day she'll read it and get past the middle section. And then he returns back to where he was packing.
Dani's in her office going through more binders, notebooks, papers, and she comes across some sheet music. Dani's birthday, Eoan took her to the studio that he works at. And he sat her down, and everyone at the studio was watching as Eoan sat down at a piano. And he starts to play the piano. It's an unfamiliar song. Dani doesn't recognize it. She looks at the sheet music that he handed her. Can't make any sense of the notes. But he starts to sing an original song that he wrote just for Dani. And Eoan typically showed action and used some words to express how he felt, but never in a way that was this vulnerable. And it was one of the few, but most precious moments to her. And she thinks back to how everyone brought out balloons and cupcakes and sweet little things to celebrate a birthday, that even though Eoan didn't do much for his birthday, he still thought to do something for her. And she just ran up to him and kissed him and messed with his hair and embarrassed him in front of everyone. And he just smiled and down at her, and they hugged, and it was a very special moment. And as Dani looks at these sheets and still can't understand them, she can't bear to part with them. So she puts them in one of her boxes and goes back to packing.
Clearing out one of the drawers, he finds an old necklace. One of the first things he got for Dani. To him, it meant everything at the time, because it was the first gift he had ever gotten someone he cared about to that level. It's a simple necklace, bought around Valentine's Day. Small etchings of sapphire and ruby on a heart. Nothing he thought about more than purchasing at the time, but then seeing her light up when she got it, seeing the glow on her face when she wore it for the first time and looked behind in the mirror, and how it accentuated all the colors she liked to wear. At the time, it was the most beautiful necklace he had ever seen on the person he thought would be wearing it forever. And he stops for a second and wonders how it ended up in this drawer of things. Thinks back to the last time he even saw Dani wearing it, and tries to understand how they came so far from then. He looks down at it one more time, knowing that it's not his style, thinking that he could probably sell it for a bit, but that it wouldn't really be worth to sell. And then I think he realizes how many other people could have a chance to get the same joy from it, and he puts it in the donate pile.
Dani leaves her office for a moment and goes to the bedroom to grab some tissues, as she has not stopped crying since they decided today was the day. She goes to her nightstand and looks at it and sees that it's the one that they got from an antique shop. It doesn't fit anything else in the house, but she remembers that the day that they went to the antique shop and how they were like, she convinced him, hey, let's do something different. Like, everything in our flat looks normal. Let's get something weird. So they found this really old piece of furniture that they turned into a nightstand, and she painted it to look somewhat normal so that Ian wouldn't bring up the Christmas trees and the lights, and that was okay for her because, of course, she wants him happy, and she got him to go to the thrift store in the first place. The antique shop, and she made sure it was nice and it was pretty so that anytime Ian looked at it, he wouldn't pick on her, and she knew that it was always out of love. But in one of the drawers, she carved their initials like she does in everything. But she can't stand to look. She can't stand to look at this after she leaves. She doesn't want to be reminded of that. This isn't something that can be tucked away. It's the first thing, if it wasn't Ian, that she would see in the morning. And the last thing, if it wasn't Ian, she would see when she goes to bed. And she's just going to put it in the donate pile.
Going through the pile of clothes still on the floor from a few days ago, Ian's sorting out some pants and finds in it a box, a small box containing a ring that he had picked up the day of their fight. The day that Dani said nothing is working and everything is bad. And no matter how much she meant it to be her job, she couldn't stop saying it about everything. And when they tried to ask about it being them, Dani couldn't separate everything from them. She just kept saying, we'll figure it out. But he knew they couldn't figure it out because she'd never be happy. And he knew it wasn't the right time to pull a ring out. He knew waiting to the next day might help, but it didn't. And so from his pants, he pulls out a small box with an unopened ring. And he goes and puts it in his pile, thinking about maybe someday someone can use it. Maybe someday he'll find someone else who would like the way it glows. Maybe someday he'd find someone to fill the void he's about to have. But donating it would be a waste, and she doesn't even know what it's from, so it'd be rude to leave it for her to find one day and not have answers on what the intention was for. So instead he sits down and looks at it lets it go through the really boring overhead light as all the lamps are being packed away, and just watches the way it would have glittered in the light had anyone seen it, before closing the lid again, putting a ring back in the dark where it will benefit nobody and no one will know it's ever been there, and then hide it in the bottom of his pile.
Dani steps into the kitchen for a moment to grab a glass of water. She looks up near the kitchen table and sees that there's a giant housewarming gift from her parents. And it's a giant spoon and fork, as is tradition in Filipino culture. They loved Ian so much that they wanted to share part of her culture with him. And it's a symbol of the importance of family meals. It is a small token, but it was so big for them, as this is the first time Dani had ever moved in with somebody, and the first person that she brought home to her family. The first person she told them that she loved. And when she said they were going to be moving in together, they had dinner at her house and they presented them with these little gifts that might not mean anything to most people, but for them it was a really big deal that their daughter met someone that would accept her, match her energy with a calm to the wild that she was. But she hasn't been that way for a while. She's lost herself a bit. She picks up the gift from her parents and looks at the carving. It says to Ian on them, because of course they were going to address it to him, but they spelled Ian wrong. They spelled it the American way. But he didn't mind that. He thought that they tried, and it was, of course, a nice gesture. And she smiles a bit as she looks and remembers that they would just joke about it. But they're not going to be having dinners together anymore. They're not going to cook any meals together anymore. They're not going to order in when the both of them are feeling extra tired. They're just not going to do anything together anymore. So there's no point in keeping these. So just putting them in the donate pile.
Ian comes upon a binder full of all the photos that they've taken together, that they've had printed out every time, because they ran out of wall space to show off how much they enjoyed being together. And so after a bit, they got a photo album where they could keep all of them, in order from the start The first picture taken on that vacation down at the pier. The picture of them with a giant bear. A picture of the cabin that they stayed in with the joke underneath it that it would be their home where they retired. Pictures of kids at the museum. Pictures of the dinosaurs, of their first Christmas together. When they finally got to Halloween as Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Pictures of them with their families. Pictures of them at his cousin's wedding, where she was standing up at the family picture with everyone else. Pictures of when they went out with their friends. A picture where Dani looks her happiest in front of her salon after it got a new facelift upgrade. More recently, pictures of each of them by themselves, out places. Pictures of the set he's working on. Pictures she sends people from back home from the office she's doing her remote work at. Pictures of them sitting on the couch that they send as a check-in in the family group chat. And just pictures that the others have taken of each other. And they're most candid. Wanting to capture all of the images in the way that they saw each other. Eoan laying on a couch upside down, reading a book. And Dani yelling furiously at the TV when her favorite contestants are voted off. The light streaming in on an early morning when neither one is really waking up. Book detailing the last 18 plus months together. And he's not yet ready to get rid of it. Despite all of the memories, despite the fact that he might go through and destroy some of them later, he knows that at least one day one of the pictures will mean something to him again. And so he puts the photo album in his box and heads out to find the next item.
Dani's back in her office. And next to her desk in the corner is the giant stuffed bear that they won at the pier. And she goes to picks it up. And she feels so alone and she just starts to cry as she holds the bear. It was a very comforting feeling, but reminds her of the time that they were at the pier for Eoan's birthday and how she convinced him to do one of those climb the ladder and ring the bell things where you're entirely horizontal and it was nearly impossible. Eoan had to do it like 10 times and Dani was laughing the entire time. But through spite and determination, Eoan managed to get it and he won it for her and he presented it to her like some knight who saved the princess, and it cost her $150, but in the end it was for his birthday and it didn't matter because they were together and they were happy, and it's their first big trip away. And as she looks at this bear, gets she's really sentimental about this bear. And she knows that she can't let it go, so she lets it stay. She puts it on her computer chair and moves on.
Next to the couch, underneath a side table, is the box collection of board games that they own. Decks of cards spent learning to play two-player games, promising they wouldn't be too competitive, but never holding up to either end of the promise there. Playfully being mad when the other won, but also celebrating the victory that they got for each other. Never being combative, always being supportive and competitive. The first deck of cards that they bought for his birthday when they were gone. A deck of Uno cards, several two-player games, and a bunch of games that they set up to make two-player on nights that nobody could come visit. Ian pulls out one of the boxes and looks at it. It's a really old, faded version of Guess Who. They had the best time always sitting down and having a glass of wine together and seeing who could win. And after they started to memorize the placement of the tiles, they would take them out and move them around again. They would also often play based on just the vibe the character has instead of real traits, which is how you found out who would be a good tipper and who definitely orders munchies at 3 a.m. He looks at the small bag inside of pictures of their friends and loved ones that they've made. For when they wanted to have a lot of extra fun with it, they'd use people they actually know and try and guess that way. He moves the bag of pictures to the side, and underneath it sees the table plans that they had made for if they ever had wanted to throw a big party, trial run a wedding, who of their friends would sit well next to each other, and who should never meet because it would be chaos for all of them involved if these people ever found each other. He takes out the pictures of loved ones. He takes out the plans for the party that never would really happen, but now certainly never will. And he walks over and disposes of them. Puts the lid back on the box and closes it. And looks through the rest of them, some still unopened as they got them for the next time all of their friends would come visit. They had just moved to a new town and had told all their friends they could come whenever they wanted. And so they ordered a bunch of games that whenever they got around to throwing their housewarming party, people could play with them for the weekend when they come over. And Ian looks at this unopened box, looks at the well-used cards, and decides that he's going to keep them. Goes over to his pile and puts them down, and goes through one by one to make sure that there's nothing private or special in them, as they have a habit of putting themselves into everything they do. He takes a lot of time to make sure that he's not likely to find a rampant picture of the two of them when he sits down to play it again in the future.
Dani needs some fresh air, so she just goes out to the outdoor area where they would typically have breakfast on weekends. And she just sits at the little garden table and looks around at the floor and sees all of the supplies for the catio that they were building together. She decided that she wanted to build one so her cats could go outside and chase birds in a safe way. But she's really clumsy and doesn't really do the building thing. And Eoan volunteered to help, and because that's what he did. He's always helpful and cares, and they'd work together and laugh, and especially if one of them got in some weird twisted position that shouldn't be possible or safe, but still managed to somehow get the bolts where they needed to be. But this was towards the end of their relationship, and it just, as the days went by, they just decided that maybe they should stop, because she wasn't going to be living there anymore. And there would be no point in continuing something if they weren't going to finish. So she's going to donate all of the supplies.
The last big item that needs to be sorted out is a box containing an 8.5-foot Christmas tree. A tree that barely fit in here. But Dani wanted it to touch the ceiling, to have the most amount of room possible, for both of them to have their half of it. It's a large box, held together with duct tape, even though it's only been open for one winter. It's really hard to get it back together once you open it. Some things are just like that. Once opened, they can't truly be closed again. Eoan sits on the box for a second, trying to decide where it's going to go. It never really fit the room. It would be pointless to keep it. But he also knows the size of the car Dani has to move back home. And it's not going to fit in there. It would be rude to force it on her. But she always cared about it far more than he did. And so he takes the box, pushing it up as though he's about to set it up again. Set it up for the second time. And then just slides it with the rug on the floor over to the front door. So it's the easiest to take when she decides to leave. And he puts the Christmas tree in her pile with all the ornaments, all the colorful decorations, and all of the things that cast a warm light, knowing that this year it'll be beautiful whites, maybe a little bit of green, but simple and clean.
Danny looks over at the few things that Danny's looking over at the few things that she's decided to keep. Many of the things are too painful to keep, and she's trying to decide as a last gesture, even though nothing's ever gonna be back to normal, maybe there's something that she can give him that'll make him smile. Maybe something that'll make him feel safe or remind him of a good time, that many good times they've had together, but it's a toss up. But she decides that she's going to take. It's hard for her, but she decides to take the teddy bear. As Ian's not looking, if he's in another room or something, she takes the giant teddy bear and tucks it away underneath all of his things. So hopefully by the time that she leaves, he'll see it, and maybe it'll make him think of her. Maybe he'll smile. Maybe things can work out in the future. Maybe he'll keep it. Maybe he'll hug it. Maybe he'll think of her. Maybe it doesn't have to end. Maybe they can work things out, and he knows how much these things mean to her, but she can't part with the music. So she parts with the bear and keeps the song that he wrote for her. Because there will never be anything like it again.
While Dani is inside, getting the last of her things, Ian goes to do a check to make sure that the car is packed in a way that will last the trip. And he sees how empty it is. He sees that a lot of the things she brought were hers, but nothing really of theirs was making the trip back. The furniture is mostly still his, or at least in his place, because they bought it for here. It wouldn't really fit the spot they used to have, or wherever Dani's going to live next. And so he thinks about how easy it was for him to dispose of the pictures of their friends and family, and knows that the photo album is safer in her hands than it is his. So he walks inside and grabs it, takes one last look through them, looks at the countless pages at the end where they thought they'd fill them up, and removes those pages so that the story ends with the last picture in the book before closing it and putting it on the ground behind the driver's seat, so she's not likely to see it until she's well gone. And he's aware that he'll never see the photos again, but he's okay with that.
Dani does one last check around the flat, make sure that everything is where it needs to be. She can see Ian's just walked into his room, but can't bring herself to say goodbye because they've already said goodbye. And saying it again would just hurt more. So she grabs her keys off of the table, and before he can come out, she just leaves. But she can't help but look towards his window and mouths the words, "I love you, and I will always love you. And I'm so sorry that this didn't work." And she prepares herself for a long drive back to where she grew up, but a place that isn't her home anymore. As her home's always going to be with Ian. And that's where we leave Dani.
Inside the house, Ian leaves his room and heads to what was their office but is now just his office, and feels how empty it is. Half the room is gone, but sees in the corner a giant stuffed bear. He smiles, a sad smile that doesn't convey anything other than a reaction to seeing it. He sits down and pulls the bear in and holds it for a while. The time passes slow, so he can't really tell if it's an hour or seconds, until his phone buzzes, letting him know it's only been 2 minutes. And he knows that despite everything, he has a project he needs to finish. So he stands up and he heads to the piano in the office. And he pulls out a new sheet of paper to start writing whatever it is that needs to sound wonderful and happy, not knowing the next time he'll feel either of those. And that's the end of Ian's story.
We did
Thank
it.
you, everyone.
No.
Thank Thank
how are
you,
we doing,
everyone,
Sean?
for joining us on this journey. Whether you've been here for this episode or you've been here for all three, we appreciate it. Thank you especially to RahRah for writing this game as well as the last
Yes.
game. You can find them on itch.io/RahRah. It's story time, maybe. No, you get no compensation, chat. Thank you for the hydrate. What?
Do we get some kind of compensation? No! Give us the compensation! None of you get compensation!
But yeah, that has been our 3-part series of They Tried. Yeah, Gloria, who are you? Where can people find you? What do you have coming up?
I don't even know anymore. I'm Gloria. I just suffered a breakup with Sean, so that's great. There's no character bleed. What? But also, Gloria Glow Pinks the Charm Party. I typically like to tell games, or tell stories that are fun and lighthearted, but I like to have moments where things hurt. I'm playing more scary games this week.
You're good?
I'm laughing because I'm about to promote that we're playing Phasmophobia on Friday. Very, very different to this. Hey, I can't speak anymore. Sean and I do many things together, and this is one of the most heartbreaking, most beautiful stories, and it's all thanks to Taylor and RahRah for creating such beautiful games. 10 out of 10 would do it again, maybe. Sean, who are you? Where can people find you?
Yes. Hello, world. I am Sean. If you are here, you're probably on my channel or Gloria's channel, where my name is in the description. But yeah, I am Sean. You can find me all across the internet at Help Action Needed, playing variety of indie TTRPGs primarily, especially ones that people I know in the space have created, because it lets me show off people who do really good work. If you like D&D done wrong because Sean refuses to run it as written, there's also a podcast you could listen to, which exists. It's also called Help Action Needed. It follows a bunch of different stories. Right now we're doing a series featuring Gloria called Down the Forest Road, which is really good and really autumnal, so perfect for the time of the year. If you want to find me in the future, you can go to Roll D5 tomorrow, where I'm going to be running a very different game from this called Flight or Fright. It's a game where you put on Halloween costumes and they slowly consume you if you use too much of their power. You can also find me on Friday over on Gloria's channel playing Phasmophobia for the first time, or on Saturday on Spunky Taylor, helping her with a massive 12-hour stream, raising funds, just to, do the things that life is requiring these days, where we're going to be playing some voice-acted Ace Attorney, because it's really fun when we sit down and we give the characters really bad voices and just play through it. But that's me.
Yeah.
We're going to go to our end screen and
I don't have one.